Hello everyone, welcome to FOSDEM, welcome to the community track. I hope you're having a great day. I'm having a fantastic day because today I get to talk to you about how we all can tear down barriers for contributions, for new contributors and for non-coders. So, and with that, let's dive right into. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Dan. I'm a software developer working at SUSE. Besides my day job at SUSE, I'm also a member of the Fedora community where I do some package maintenance and some stuff with the i3 spin. I also manage a few packages in OpenSUSE itself. So, few of my big passions is working on developer tools. So I was hired as a software developer working in the development engagement program, and empowering other developers has been one of my big hobbies, or let's say one of my big passions. Besides that, it's also testing and documentation, and for less technical stuff, cooking and some video games. But what I would like to emphasize is I've also recently worked a bit on helping people contribute to open source projects, and I find this highly rewarding. And this is also why I'm giving this presentation, so that I can help you empower others to contribute more. In case you are not yet sick of me, you can follow me on GitHub or on other social media, for instance Mastodon and Twitter, if you care about that. And if you want to send me encrypted emails, you can find my GNU-PG key linked on the slide below. So let's take a look at what we are going to cover today. And I'd first like to start out with a short story, how this thing all came together, so that you know my standpoint. Then let's outline who's really the target audience here. And then for the big parts, is going to be first talk a bit about tooling, and then about how to create a welcoming community that really encourages contributions. And at last, I'll give you a short checklist, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So, as I promised, story time. I mentioned previously I'm a software developer at SUSE, and at SUSE we recently, it's been nearly a year now. Time flies. So we started the Open Source Community Citizens Network, which is essentially a forum for employees to engage and share their knowledge about open source. But we also found out, well, we are a big company. We also have departments which are not directly related to open source and don't work with open source every day. For instance, the Human Resources Department. They aren't really directly involved in this. And so we wanted to bring them the open source spirit closer to them. And so the whole thing started with a workshop. So we wanted to run a workshop where we really live by this mantra: everyone can contribute to open source. And so I started to look around, and where can really someone who is not a coder and who does not want to become one? So this has been one of the key points. Where can they contribute to, and how can they contribute? So if you go to if you ask in the open source community, then everyone will tell you, yeah, well, just write documentation, write translations, write tutorials, test it. It's easy. And then you start looking around and you find out, no, it's not. It's actually everything but easy. It's easy if you have the technical knowledge. If you don't have the technical knowledge, then it's very, very hard. So if you try to get into the mindset of someone who isn't maybe running Linux, who doesn't have gettext installed, who doesn't know how Markdown works, or restructured text, or DocBook, who has never used Git, for these people, even if your project is on GitHub, it's a huge barrier. And so after doing a lot of collection and throwing out a lot of promising projects, it came down to a rather short list of very big and very prominent projects. And with that, I'd like to really share my take on this. What can you, as a project, package maintainer, or as a software open source project maintainer, what can you really do to empower others to contribute? So, target audience. Who is really the target audience of this? And that's, you are an open source maintainer. This is really aimed at you. And also it's aimed at you, provided that you want more contributions and more contributors. I just want to stress this out because you really have to want this, and you must be willing to put in the work, because this is a lot of work, and it's not a one-time job. It's a continuous process. It's something that you'll be doing essentially forever. So sorry about that, but you will be working on this forever and ever and ever. It's very rewarding if you see your community grow, if you get more contributors. But really ask yourself first, are you willing to put in the time? So you will need to write a lot of documentation. You will really have to polish up your work. You will have to polish up your communication channels. You will have to do a ton of research. You will have to do a ton of promotion. And you have to ask yourself, is this worth it for me? Will I put in the time? Can I put in the time? And is it, and also to a certain extent, if your open source project is your hobby, then you also have to ask yourself, is this fun? Because if it's your hobby, it should stay fun. If it stops being fun, then it becomes an unpaid job, and that sucks. So you don't want to do that either. Okay, but so let's assume you want to do this. You want to put in the work. So ask yourself, who's your target audience? Who do you want to in which areas do you want to recruit new people? Maybe you have a great user-facing documentation, but your project is in dire need of translations. You will have to do other stuff. Or maybe you have a ton of developers, but your user docs, they are pretty terrible, or you have trouble reaching people that will support or do testing. So really ask yourself first, who are you lacking? Maybe you have a ton of users, but you can't really convert these users to contributors and maintainers. So do some research. Who is your target audience? And then based on that, do what brings you essentially the most bang for your buck. So what will yield the highest reward? And also I want to highlight, and as a last thing on this slide, what I'd like to highlight is, as usual, there is no silver bullet. So what I'll tell you in the next 25 minutes is essentially my take on this, that's either from personal experience or from various sources that I gathered around the internet. And there is no guaranteed recipe. You will always have to fiddle around with it. You'll always have to adjust it to your project. So really, you will have to, there is no guaranteed recipe that will work for you. Every project is different. Everything works differently. So please take every advice I give you here with a grain of salt. So and now let's dive essentially right into it. And so your prime directive as an open source contributor should be, you should make it trivial to contribute. Because otherwise, if it's super, super hard, people will get demotivated and they will probably not do it. So if you want to put it to an extreme, ask yourself, can my grandma provided that she's still there, I hope. Can she correct a typo in your open source project? And I can tell you, with most projects where my grandma might use, she can't. And for example, the biggest barrier for her would be the documentation is written in English. She doesn't speak English. It's very likely she never will. And even although one of my grandmothers is rather technically proficient, English is a huge barrier for her. So if you really want contributions from non-coders, take a look at one of your friends, relatives that's not very proficient with computers, that could do some meaningful work. For instance, they can write very well, or they can present very well. Can they contribute? If they can't, you have to figure out why, and you have to improve this process. So let's take a few points that you have to ask yourself. If I'm someone who would like to contribute, can I figure out how to do that? So essentially, is there documentation that explains this? And is this documentation approachable to me? Which also means, is this documentation available in my language? So, I mean, if we are talking about code, then it's kind of, you probably only really have to write this in English. That's pretty clear. But if you're talking about translations, this is something which also could be available in other languages, since people can, maybe they have a rough grasp of English, but they understand their mother tongue much better. So then, or writing user documentation. Imagine you have an image manipulation program. If you want to write a tutorial, you don't have to do that in English. You can do that in your mother tongue. You will have an audience for that. So that would be terrific if this was available in your mother tongue. So then, what do I need to contribute? So this is especially with respect to tooling. So can I get the required tools on my system? And how hard is it to get them? If you require if you need some rather obscure tools that only run on an ancient version of OpenBSD, then that's going to deter that's going to deter a lot of people. If you have some cloud native project and you need 5 AVS instances in the cloud and three public IPs, I'm probably not gonna give that a try, because I don't want to spend so much cash on AVS, on AWS. So really think about what's the barrier to entry and what tools do you need. Then also, so if you're a contributor, you want to join the community. How can I do that? If you just have a GitHub repo or just a web page, there should be somewhere a link to a forum or some place where you can join other interested contributors and other contributors. So that's rather important. Well, and at last also, how can you get your contribution accepted? So you send in, I mean, nowadays with GitHub being so prevalent, it's rather obvious for code contributions. But if we're talking maybe about user documentation, it can be hard figuring out where is it actually, or when it comes to tutorials. Sometimes tutorials are just listed on a page, and you would now like to know, okay, I have written a tutorial, how can I get it in there? And under which conditions will it be accepted? Some projects require you to sign some legal work. You should really state this, and you should also have clear rules when you will accept a contribution. And is this whole process really doable, and is it documented? That's also another thing to consider. But now, let's dive into the first part, and that's tooling. So tooling should be help. So the tools that you have, they should help you out, and they shouldn't be a hindrance. So as I outlined previously, use the tools to make your job easier and to help your contributors contribute and to empower your community. They shouldn't, you don't want to throw in a ton of tools that will make everyone's life miserable, because that's just not fun. It will deter people from contributing. So really get the most out of the tools and use tools that are available. If I need to buy some proprietary compiler to fix a bug in your project, sorry, I'm probably not going to do that unless I'm getting paid for that. And most contributors are probably not getting paid. So let's take a look at a few tools that can help us out. First thing, this is a rather recent development, and that's web editors. This is thanks to the immense growth of VS Code, which is a web-based, which is essentially a it's a text editor running in a headless Chrome browser, and because of that, it can run also in the web. There's multiple options here. I've picked the 3 big ones that I know of. They are all based on VS Code, so that's gitpod.io, GitHub Codespaces. For GitHub Codespaces, you just have to log into GitHub and press dot, I think, and it will open a VS Code instance, and Eclipse here. These are all, as I said, based on VS Code. And you can really customize, tweak these. And the nice thing is, it means all you need to contribute is a web browser. Who doesn't have a web browser nowadays? So this drastically reduces the barrier to entry. And I'd also now like to demonstrate you Gitpod. So what I have open here is a Gitpod instance from the Open VS Code server, and so this is the upstream project for Gitpod, and essentially, so this is really not running on my machine. This is, I mean, the web browser is, but this looks like VS Code, but it's actually Gitpod, and I could just browse around in here. I have access to version control. I can take a look at the GitHub pull requests, issues, etc. pp. I have a pre-config here. I have already some tasks were ran, and the cool thing is, because this is really the user interface, I also I also get a preview of what I have coded. So assuming I would have edited something in here, I could also make a preview here. So anyway, back to the actual presentation. So so the cool thing about this is really drastically reduces the barrier to entry. My personal recommendation would be maybe go for Gitpod, because that's really fully open source. You can self-host it. I'm not 100% how it's with Eclipse here, but you can get a free account there, which runs in Red Hat's OpenShift. GitHub's Codespaces are unfortunately proprietary. So with these, you can really customize them, you can tweak them, they are all container based, so you can supply your own container image where you install all your dependencies, where you install all your tools. You can add Visual Studio Code extensions, and there's a ton, so you will have a really great work environment. And what I'd like to add, I'm not a VS Code user myself. I've been using Emacs for a long time. I'm probably never going to switch from it, but for a beginner, this is perfect. So next thing, translations. If you want contributors to help you out with translations, please use a web service like Weblate or Transifex. But Weblate is again fully open source. You can self-host it, or you can use the hosted.weblate.org. And here I'll once again just shortly show you the hosted the Weblate instance from LibreOffice, and it shows you a rather intuitive UI where you can select various components. You can check out which languages are untranslated. Can select strings that need action. So let me just select one here. And then you can essentially edit all this in your browser. And this is pretty simple to pull off, and it's much simpler than running getText or something like that, or editing XML translation files on your local machine. And you can really get a lot of valuable contributions from people that speak 2 or 3 languages, but they don't have getText installed, but they know how to translate stuff. So this is also pretty good for drive-by contributions. If you can motivate your people to just go there and translate, but I'm not sure how many drive-by contributions you'll get here and whether you really want them with translations. That's up to you to decide. But really, something like Weblate is really great. In a perfect world, I'd actually like my so let's just say I have here my browser and I would like to translate this stuff. It would be actually perfect if I could just go in here and go into a translation mode and right click and do something like suggest translation. But well, that's also really only a good point for a GUI program. So documentation and tutorials. Here a few things to point out. So you should really document how they should be edited. So I'm not necessarily talking about the developer documentation, because that should really be close to the code. I'm talking more about the user documentation, and this is usually published somewhere on your web page. And tutorials, well, they are usually somewhere on your webpage. And there it becomes kind of tricky to figure out, okay, where are the sources of this? And so what I'd really suggest is have somewhere a link to edit this page. So if you want to see an example, let me just pull out the documentation of K3S. And if you go here, click on you see on the bottom, edit this page. This takes you directly to GitHub. And if you're already logged in, you can start editing it. And for something like K3S, this is perfectly reasonable, because your target audience are coders, and they are very likely going to have a GitHub account. If your target audience is different, maybe open Gitpod first or something like that. And then also think about the format in which your documentation is written. If you're using something like DocBook, which is XML, this is going to be really hard for someone who's not familiar with coding. But even something like restructured text is already in a few areas a little bit obscure, and also even Markdown. So what I would highly suggest you do, and what I've seen, for instance, the Document Foundation do with LibreOffice is, if people are willing to write documentation, and to write an extensive tutorial, accept any format, even if they send you a Word document, even if they send it to you by snail mail on paper. Take the format, you do the conversion. Make this abundantly clear. You can get great input from people due to this, that you'd otherwise miss out, because they just take a look at your sources and they say, sorry, I have no clue. I have no clue how to write anything in this. And so if you do this, you can get contributions from them. Of course, only do that for really meaningful ones, because otherwise you'll get swamped in bad Word documents and it's not going to be fun. So be reasonable here. For communication, have one place to reach your project. And by one place, I mean actually multiple, but don't have 50 chat rooms littered over various platforms and you're on one of them and the other ones exist kind of in a weird limbo. So have a place for real-time chat. So I wouldn't suggest to use IRC nowadays, honestly, unless your community lives there. I'd say go with Matrix, and if there's other networks, bridge to them, but preferably go there where your community is. So if you're creating a cloud native project, then probably it's going to be Slack. If it's something around gaming, it's probably going to be Discord. And so just take a look, where are your users, where are your contributors, what do they use? Then you want something like forums or a mailing list. Again, really, this is maybe more for, depends if you have more users and less developers, then go with something like Discourse. If you want to more target development stuff, then a mailing list is probably more appropriate, because this Discourse to mail bridge is, at least I've been told, not too great. Also, if you have also try to separate the user and the developer forum so that they are not in perfectly in one place, make sub forums, otherwise it's going to get a mess. And then have something like a feature or an issue tracker. For a bigger project, you might also want to separate them, but here I'd say your project is very likely already on some GitForge like GitHub or GitLab, and there you have an issue tracker. And if your project is more popular and bigger, then you might not want to have the feature requests in there, because it's just going to get very, very busy. Okay, and now for the second part, where we're going to talk about community. So rule number one is you as the project maintainer, you have your community of other maintainers, of your contributors and of your users. And so you really should see yourself as an enabler and as someone who's empowering others, and you shouldn't be a gatekeeper. So really, if someone comes in and wants to help you, you should do everything to allow them to contribute, even if it means that it's going to take you 10 times longer than doing it yourself. You have to help. You have to help them. You have to empower them, and really, you must want to do this. Otherwise, it's not gonna fly. But so, at first, I'd like to take a tiny detour, and that's the so-called contributor funnel. This term has been created by Mike McQuaid, who's made a blog post about this, and so this image is essentially adapted from him. And so the usual way how contributors are recruited is they first start out as users, then they become contributors, and then eventually maintainers. This is generally how it works. You can, of course, jump right into becoming a maintainer, but usually being a user of this project means you already have a certain stake in there, and because otherwise just becoming a maintainer without actually using it is kind of it's rather unusual. But this really means there's a rather obvious way how to increase the amount of contributions, and that's increase the user base. So think about for instance, about your favorite Linux distribution. Try to estimate how many users it has and how many people do actually contribute to that. So the percentages, I would be highly surprised if even 1% of the users actually contributes. But I really don't have the numbers. But if we go with 1% and you have 100 users, that means there's one contributor, and that's you. So if you want more contributors, make your project more popular. really, that's about it. Talk about it. Make lightning talks. Put it out on Twitter, on Mastodon. Make videos about it. Promote it. It will pay off. People will come to you. Then, when it comes to recruiting contributors, so what I'd like to show you here, this is a graph from a study that has been run by Mozilla, and they took a look about which factors influence people to contribute, especially when it comes to first-time contributions. And so what you can see here are various factors and how it impacts their willingness to and how it impacts their willingness to onboard and to contribute. And what you see here, there's two big things. First is future impact. So that means essentially people who saw a vision that what they can do and how they can impact the project, they are much more likely to contribute. And especially their past, the impact that they had in the past had really no influence at all. So it means give your contributors a clear vision. Make a page which outlines what you want to do with the project and where everyone can really help. And this is much more important what they actually did already in the past, even if it was nothing. Having a clear vision motivates people a lot. So create something like that. Have features ready. Have follow-up features ready. Have stuff to do for new contributors. And when it comes to onboarding, contributors that had a great onboarding experience, that encouraged them to onboard others as well. So focus on onboarding new people. If someone new shows up, greet them, be kind to them, help them out, point them to things, answer their questions, empower them to do great things. They will stay and they will do the same thing again. If you are nasty to them and tell them stuff like RTFM, they're probably gonna leave, and even if they don't leave, they're probably going to be about as nasty to others or just not be there. So then another thing about recruiting contributors. So this is also a graph from the same study, and this is how long it took. So this is a histogram of how long it took people to contribute after they signed up. And this really illustrates people sign up and they start doing stuff immediately. And after that, they essentially stop, especially if they have no feedback. And what also Mozilla ran, that was with respect to code contributions. They took a look. So if you respond really to pull requests, patches within 48 hours, it's very likely that people will return. If it takes you longer than a week, you aren't seeing them again. Never. They are really not returning. Even if they get a notification, they just don't care. So be prompt. And even if it means, hey, sorry, I'm traveling, I'll take a look soon. Just tell them you're going to take a look and you're going to consider it. And also have a follow-up feature. So people, once they are done, give them something else that they can work on. How can you retain your contributors that you've now recruited? So really, you have to keep them motivated. And here it makes a lot of sense what's the motivation for people to contribute. So there's, for instance, intrinsic motivation. So people that just do this for fun. They code for fun. And I mean, what can you do here? You can essentially keep the project fun. Keep a friendly community, keep everyone engaged, don't make it feel like work, don't put in pointless processes. There are people who do it out of altruism and who just do it because they feel like they belong to a community and they want to be part of this community. So with these people, you have to give them a place to feel really, to see their impact and to be a part of the community. There's people who do it for future rewards. So, for instance, they want to sell their skills. They want to sell services around the software, or for self-marketing, or for being recognized by their peers. And here I'd say, I'm not sure if you can really do something as a project maintainer, trying to make it market friendly, but I'm not sure how much you can do really here. And the last one is the cliched scratch your own itch. So I wouldn't say I wouldn't say ensure that their itch is never fully scratched. That's a bad approach. So really just let them scratch their itch, and then try to get them on the hook that they will like the community, and then they'll stay. You should really build a welcoming community, because a welcoming community will keep people in there, and an unwelcoming one will not be really that great, and it will deter people. So pick yourself a code of conduct, pick yourself some values that you want to live by, and enforce this. Don't just take one, slap it in a project, and ignore it. Take some, define your values, how you want to treat your community, how you want to be treated, and live by this. And that also means that you will have to resolve conflicts, and you will have to remove bad actors if it comes to them. It happens, but unfortunately you have to do that. Give your community a place to meet and talk. So give them a forum to exchange their ideas. This is not only so that your community has a sense of belonging, because if it's just a GitHub repo, that doesn't give you a community. You want to give them a place where they can talk. And also, it's not only for them, it's also for you. Because if all communication has to go through you, it's going to put you under a whole ton of stress. So give your community a place to talk. Document your processes. And document your processes and really enforce them, because everything that's documented and where there's rules written down, it's less ambiguous. There's less, it means that just you can say, okay, we have a rule for this, and it should be done like that, and not like that because we have this rule. And also, of course, have a process to change rules. Yeah? Be present. Be friendly, especially for new contributors. You should be there, you should promptly respond, and you should greet them. So don't be this cliched RTFM guy. And as I said, empower your contributors. So even if it takes them 10 or 100 times the amount of time that it would take you, if you mentor them, if you teach them, they will very likely return. That's really, if someone new shows up, show them around, tell them what they can do, and show them the place. They will stay. If you just tell them, just read the docs, and the docs are one page, then you will not see them again. And with that, I'd like to give you the short checklist that you can print out. So what should your project have? You should have a landing page. If you want to take a look at a really good one, go to whatcanidoformozilla.org. There's also a variant from the Document Foundation, from Fedora. This one is really great because it shows you, let's just open it. It just shows you what you can do. And then you get, so essentially I want to translate, and it will take you directly to the docs. So, sorry. Okay. Have links to appropriate communication channels with a newbie corner. Have quick start guides. Have an automated CI that will verify new contributions. Have a list of tasks for new contributors. And have follow-up tasks so that you have something to give them what they should do. And then follow-up tasks. Well, and at last, ask yourself, can my grandma really correct the typo? Well, with that, I'd like to provide you with a few links. You can find the slides on GitHub, and all the links are there as well. Here you have the obligatory legal slide with all the licenses in use. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I'm now open for questions.